All right, I'd like to call the order the November 10th, 2025 Mountlake Terrace Planning Commission meeting to order. Would you please take the roll?
Chair Batista,
Here.
Vice Chair Betcher,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson,
Here.
Commissioner Wu,
Present.
Commissioner Stenson is not present at roll call, and Commissioner Morgan has requested an excusal for this evening.
Would anybody like to make a motion to excuse Commissioner Morgan?
Motion to excuse Commissioner Morgan.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to excuse Commissioner Morgan. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Commissioner Morgan is excused for tonight's meeting. Let's go on to item number 3, approval of the October 27th meeting minutes. Anybody have any changes or corrections to those?
None.
Not hearing or seeing any, so we'll go ahead and move on to item number 4, public comment. Let the record show that there is no public in person tonight. Do we have anybody who's signed up online or submitted anything online?
We currently have one person in the chat. Mike, if you are currently wishing to speak on items not related to tonight's public hearing, please raise your hand. Nothing is indicated by the guest.
Seeing no indication of public comment, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 5, public hearing for review and recommendation of the draft housing action plan.
All right. Okay, there we go. Let me just get this full screen. Say that one more time. Stop sharing. Why is it just not just like the one thing? Are you looking for No. Never mind. Okay. Hello, thank you for your patience. This is our final meeting together. At long last, we've made it. So I just have a little bit of information to go over tonight about, there have been just a couple changes since the last draft that you saw, so I'll talk through those and then hear any feedback, questions, comments that you all have. So at October 27th's meeting, there was some feedback about just wanting to hear a little bit more about how the actions were prioritized in the housing needs and opportunities section. And so we added a little bit of language in that section about kind of bridging the gap between what are the housing needs and then how actions are prioritized between near, midterm, and long term. And so just clarifying that near-term actions are generally actions that can be implemented relatively quickly or maintain momentum and deliver progress early on, generally over the next year or so. Midterm actions are strategies that could be advanced once current and like upcoming work in the next year or so is complete or once additional capacity becomes available. These are generally things that are a little bit bigger of a lift than the quicker near-term actions, but are still building on existing programs or existing policies. And then long-term actions are larger undertakings that will likely require new funding sources, partnerships, or programs that will take longer to come together, likely several years. And so that is really the only change that has been added based on the feedback that we got on the 27th. So today we're doing your public hearing. Then on Thursday, we are presenting to the City Council at their work session. And then on December 4th, we are doing that public hearing. And so with that, we'll here do questions or comments.
Does anybody have any
No questions.
questions or comments? Not hearing or seeing any. And that was the only change, no additional recap of anything?
No, that was the only change.
Jumping ahead, usually we get kind of a final overview
Oh, sorry.
during the public hearing, so.
I have the slides that we went over last week that have kind of the overview of the draft that I'm happy to walk through if that's helpful.
Yeah, that'll be helpful. Since tonight's the public hearing, all that kind of overview usually has to go.
Yes, yeah, I can do that. I think they're just after this. Yeah. Sorry, I think there is a way to do a PDF in like a slide format, but we're here, so I'll just keep scrolling. So just an overview of the Housing Action Plan. So it opens with a little bit of context, talks about the comprehensive plan, go into housing needs and opportunities, and then into the actions. There are several appendices that talk about the different information sources that we use, the community engagement summary, development feasibility analysis, and the policies and actions crosswalk between the comprehensive plan and the housing action plan. I'll talk a little bit more about each of these sections. I have a brief summary of each here. So like I said, the Housing Action Plan translates the housing element into a set of concrete actions, including identifying steps that the city can take to increase housing options and affordability, builds on recent work for consistency between policy direction and implementation, identifies programs, partnerships, and strategies, and helps the city make informed decisions about what to implement first based on community engagement, analysis, and priorities that we've heard from you all. These inputs helped us also to prioritize as well as identify specific actions across these sources that I just mentioned. A few different policy priorities emerged at a high level. These are supporting housing production, investing in centers and mixed-use areas, incentivizing affordable units, increasing housing diversity, and preventing displacement. This is an example sheet from the Housing Action Plan. So each action has a cut sheet, and these include an implementation timeframe, the action type, staff capacity that would be needed for implementation and maintenance, rationale, supporting housing element policies, the current policy or process that the city is doing, any implementation considerations, and if there is any relevant data, legislation, engagement themes, or analysis findings, those are also included. This is an overview of all of the actions. I'll walk through them by categories quickly, but as you can see, they're laid out by completed actions, things the city has already done, in progress actions, things the city is doing, the near-term, mid-term, and long-term actions that I talked a little bit about earlier in the presentation, and then ongoing actions that the city is either also poised to start doing relatively soon or is also already doing, but will continue to do in the long term rather than something that will be completed in the next year or so, which is what differentiates them from the in-progress actions. The things the city has already done, you all have updated the zoning and design standards in alignment with House Bill 1110 to promote middle housing. As part of that, you are also offering density bonuses for environmentally sustainable building practices. And prior to that, with the comprehensive plan, reviewing and updating the land use regulations to provide increased residential capacity to meet the 2044 housing targets. Currently, the city is working on updating its permitting forms to reflect updated allowances in its residential zones that go along with the updated middle housing types to clarify permitting procedures and better track development patterns, simplifying ADU permitting requirements by updating to a building permit only process rather than one that also has a land use process, or a separate land use process involved. And this is similar to a single family and duplex requirements currently. Updating impact fee assessments to a per square foot calculation to be proportional to unit sizes, which will help also encourage smaller housing production. The city is also currently updating its regulations for zones in the new gateway and neighborhood mixed-use land use areas to promote residential and mixed-use development that's affordable across different income levels. And the city is working on providing educational materials on the development process. And that can be things that help both developers and residents understand the recent work that the city is doing as well as ongoing work, and also just clarify the development process and any requirements that might be associated. These are items that we have identified for near-term action, and that's reviewing and updating the sub-area plans that are in the comprehensive plan to add some detail to help support the city's housing goals, reviewing the town center zoning and design standards and considering adjustments as needed to support development, reviewing and updating mobile home park standards to remove barriers to replacing and updating units, updating permitted use tables that allow for permanent supportive housing and emergency housing, clarifying regulations and definitions for small and alternative housing types, things like tiny homes, modular units, and ADUs, adopting building code amendments both to reduce barriers to home repair and rehabilitation, as well as building code amendments that could support more effective building practices, including upcoming 2026 updates for middle and multifamily housing. Near-term actions also include simplifying the permit process for middle housing to be more intuitive for homeowners and reducing development time and costs. Also amending the permit review process for projects with income-restricted affordable housing units, and offering a property tax exemption for ADUs rented to low-income households. In the midterm, in this like 3 to 5 years out from now, or as capacity allows, looking at actions like waiving or reducing impact fees for affordable housing, adopting density bonuses for income-restricted housing in gateway and neighborhood mixed-use zones, similar to what was just adopted in the residential zones, expanding tenant protection strategies to mitigate displacement risk, and adopting or considering adopting a variety of MFTE programs, including a 12-year MFTE program in R2, both an 8-year and 12-year MFTE program in R3, expanding the 12-year MFTE program to gateway and neighborhood mixed-use zones, and continuing to offer MFTE in town center, but considering phasing out the 8-year option by weighing different trade-offs that are associated with that program, and looking at that down the line in the future. And each of these expansions or program modifications have different development goals that would be associated with those, including incentivizing accessible units, incentivizing affordable units, and just generally directing development where the city might want to invest. In the long term, these are kind of longer term efforts. Those would be encouraging any affordable homeownership units developed via the middle housing density bonus option or MFTE to be stewarded by a community land trust, surveying the city's existing real estate holdings and considering transferring or providing a long-term lease to a mission-driven developer to support affordable housing or special housing feasibility. Strategically targeting public investments to add amenities like sidewalks or parks or improving infrastructure to incentivize development near transit and amenities, as well as priority growth areas that are identified in the comprehensive plan. And finally, pursuing funding for infrastructure improvements such as utility upgrades that might make acquiring and preserving at-risk affordable housing more feasible. And so the final category is ongoing actions. And these are things that the city is either already doing or plans to begin doing shortly, but will continue doing over the entire time horizon of this housing action plan, which is intended to go through the next comprehensive plan update in 10 years. And so these ongoing actions are continuing to participate in regional housing efforts, proactively engaging the county to clarify plans for distributing affordable housing funding, and encouraging investment in Mountlake Terrace with that funding, supporting applications for public affordable housing funds, pursuing opportunities to support affordable housing development on religious organization properties, and establishing relationships with community land trusts that could support alternative homeownership models. The city would also continue to host educational community workshops to provide space for participants to ask questions receive direct support and for the city to provide technical assistance for the development process, for the city to continue providing assistance for navigating permitting procedures and requirements, and supporting opportunities to purchase manufactured home communities, enforcing maintenance of investment properties, specifically in town center, or especially in town center, to disincentivize vacant and or deteriorating buildings. And then just a few more, when the city is providing public comment on proposed legislation, something it already does on an annual basis, to advocate for the state legislature to expand opportunities for homeownership of different housing types, specifically condominiums. And then 2 actions about monitoring development and regulated and naturally occurring affordable housing units that would be at risk of redevelopment. And so those are, it's a very brief overview of all of the actions. Again, each action has its own kind of cut sheet or half a page that has relevant information, including what the city's already doing, supporting analysis, different details for implementation. And so if there's additional information that you're interested in, you can look there, or I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Does anybody have any follow-up questions?
I guess less so a question, but maybe more of a request for even the near term. I often find myself looking for information from on the ground, like developers, as inputs to a lot of the policy. Just because, we can kind of sit here and theorize about what may be good or bad, but ultimately knowing what the incentives and disincentives are for actual developers would be useful. So to the extent that within ongoing partnerships or near-term solutions, there's some sort of like constant feedback loop from that development community, that would be really helpful in trying to understand and prioritize a lot of the requests or solutions that we put forth. So just a comment that would be helpful.
Yeah, clarifying if it would be helpful to have that as kind of its own action, and that like continuously engage the development community, or is something that's more of like an implementation consideration that's included in certain actions or sections?
Yeah, I would even consider a different, like 5.13 ongoing partnerships with developer communities to proactively like seek their opinion rather than say, hey, we're open to the public, come speak if you want. Just as a way to get a higher sample size of feedback. That I remember there was a gentleman who came in when we were considering the House Bill 1110 and the implementation, I believe Mr. Landsberg, super useful to hear his commentary, very, very useful. And generally just seeking out more of that type of information as we make these near, medium, and long-term decisions.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And we can definitely add that as an action in the ongoing section.
I think that's an excellent point. I might also add and coordinate, develop, or seek out and coordinate, because I think part of this is growing communities of developers, and there are different kinds of developers. There are private sector developers, there are, nonprofit developers, there's HASCO. And I think one of the things I've been talking about during these meetings, and I think I kind of see it here, but I think your point really just kind of helps bring it home, is the city has an important duty to, see who these, developers and groups are in our city, what they need, especially for things like special needs populations, and then also coordinating and aligning the goals of these to try to identify partnerships and opportunities. And I think you've kind of got the points here to, I don't know if it's explicitly stated in the points, but I think that's something I'd like to hear more about as we sort of move to the implementation phase of this, kind of how the city is doing that. But I think your point there kind of ties it all to 5.13, because I think we do kind of do that, but it's not, I don't see it necessarily explicitly stated here. And I think there's also like a coordination point to add to that as well.
Can I clarify coordination as in coordinating different feedback between different groups, or coordinating like how that, like how a I don't know, kind of like a focus group or?
Like, I think, when we make a lot of these plans, there's kind of like a statement of, we gather the feedback and then we sort of present the feedback. There's also maybe a role of like making connections or introducing people, which these events kind of naturally do. And then I'm also curious to see what we do with that feedback and where it goes. Like there should be a chain from feedback to implementation, and then also summary of the good results that come from that. Like this is, how the groups have been, doing their thing to provide more housing in the city. So I think that it's probably more of an implementation thing than necessarily something that needs to go in this plan, like explicitly stated out like that. But I think, pardon me, the coordination part of that kind of speaks to that.
Yeah, so I think we can definitely add like a separate action that's ongoing that talks about that. And then in the implementation considerations for that action, we can kind of explain a little bit more about how that would look in terms of like a process.
Sure. And we don't have to solve it now, but like I would love to see the city kind of look towards taking, if not necessarily an active role, then like a connective role.
Okay, yes, thank you for your feedback.
I think kind of what I'm hearing from both of you, and what's key to this is, when you bring up the coordination, I think the city already does engage with the developers a lot, throughout the years. They, the developers are definitely, they definitely provide their opinions to the development staff. I think the key here is that we don't always hear that feedback. And I think that's really what this, if we're going to add a line item goal to this, I think it was like, we know the city's already kind of doing this outreach to the developers, and the developers are offering it without being asked as well. I think where it kind of gets hung up is that we don't always hear that. And then, I'm not saying then all of a sudden, years go by and we have frustrated developers. Usually we only have one developer who comes in and is complaining because they want to do things a certain way, whereas we've all agreed we don't want it done that way, as opposed to sort of a more proactive engagement, saying, hey, these are our goals. Are these goals doable for you? These high level things that we want to see happen, yet we always say, oh, we're never going to be able to do that. It's never going to pencil out, blah, 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 this and blah, 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 that. And that kind of gets to sort of what my question was, is that in the, not the near term, but the sort of the midterm, sort of the 3 to 5 years out, we have several different lines that have to do with multifamily tax exemption. I would assume that we probably would hit all of those at the same time. My question would be, and this might be a question more for staff, or maybe, more of a Christie level, is this, will it actually take 3 to 5 years for us to get to that, to make those recommended changes that I think, I'm pretty much sure that the Planning Commission was all on board with seeing these tax exemptions get implemented or renewed or continued or whatever it needs to happen. I guess it's a two-part question. One, how long does that process usually take? I know we've done it in the past. Can I remember how long it took? No. And is it just a matter of trying to squeeze it into the ongoing legislative schedule that is like, oh yeah, we all know we need to do this, but we have so many other priorities that are ahead of that, and we know it's going to take 3 to 4 to 6 months or whatever it is, over the whole term from when we start the process until it's finally over. I don't know if you can answer that. If you can answer that questions. I'm assuming it's not an overnight thing, but will it take up to 5 years? I guess is my concern.
As in, you'd like to maybe see it implemented sooner, but are wondering why what would take that long? Is it because we have so many other required things to update? Yeah,
well, I mean, for example, I already know that our calendar, like for the rest of this year, is jam-packed with stuff. Because we always have this optimistic goal at the beginning of the year when we try and do our work plan. And we usually get about a month and a half into it, and it just kind of gets blown up because then something else has to take priority and gets you know, it just, everything, it's a domino effect and everything kind of gets pushed back. And so
Yes.
I know that it's a wide category, 3 to 5 years. But I have a feeling that these tax exemptions are a key component that the developers are going to need to be able to even start considering if the project is going to pencil out or not. And so I guess my concern is that if it does take up to that 3 to 5 years, then, you know, we're already dealing with, you know, sort of a pseudo recession going on, and, you know, it ebbs and flows. And so anything that can help encourage development, even in these tougher times, I think is a good thing. I know these are just overall goals, but I guess the question is this something that could be, could the process start kind of more on the sooner end as opposed to the latter end of that time window?
Yeah, I'll do my best at answering
I know
that.
it's a tough one, so.
I can definitely foresee the next 6 months to year being things we need to update in our code that we are already aware of or are required to do or already have plans to do. I think maybe it could be on the sooner end of the 3 to 5 years, maybe 2 to 3. I'm not sure if you have a sense of why it was put in the 3 to 5 year category, because we do already have the MFT program. So I don't know if you have a sense of why it is in the middle, outside of just, yes, we do have a lot that we need to do, at least in the next year.
Yeah, so like you said, there's a lot of kind of small, but there's a lot of updates in the near term that are happening over the next year or so. There's also just acknowledging that development conditions are likely to change over the next 2 to 3 years, and something that might be feasible today might not be feasible in 3 years, or might not be something that's viable for the city to engage in 3 years. There's also, like, as you noted, there's a good amount of like kind of tweaking that program and engaging with developers and figuring out where exactly the city wants to prioritize its resources. There's also engagement with like the city council and the community at large in terms of where the city is interested or able to put resources at the time. Because in some ways, multifamily tax exemption, by incentivizing development, it does increase city revenue via, like, it draws more residents, which pay utility taxes, which pay sales taxes. There's sales tax on construction, and we did some of that analysis here, and it's in one of the appendices. But again, conditions may change. Over the next 2 to 3 years, you might want to commission an additional study that goes more in depth on like what exactly each of those programs might look like. And so I think just depending on when the city is able to start that process, there might be different considerations for how it is implemented. And you might want to implement one of those options, or you might want to implement all 5. But I think it will depend on city budget, engaging different departments, those types of considerations that just take a little bit of time. I've done a few MFTE studies. I think generally they all take around like 6 months to a year, I would say, just like on the consultant side at least. And that includes like MFTE updates as well. Even when there is an existing program, it's just there's a lot of fine tuning that you want to do so that you make sure that the incentive that you're providing is actually the incentive that gets you the results that you want, and you're getting the most like bang for your buck, if you will.
And that's helpful to know too, especially, you know, if we know that, like, say, through the end of this year and through the end of next year, that our calendar is already pretty full. And so starting at the end of next year is when we could start on this, that it could still take 6 months to a year to fully flesh it out and be ready to approve any kind of changes. So, I mean, that helps kind of understand, you know, why is it in this bucket as opposed to the near term, hey, let's do this now bucket. And I'm sure council will be very interested, you know, in this. In fact, I think in the past, they're the ones that have kind of spurred this on, you know, for us to do what we what we have currently. And I have a feeling that based off of developer feedback, that's going to be something that they're probably going to want to see as well. So I guess my hope would be that there would be enough interest and demand for it to sort of be on the nearer term side of that longer range window, as opposed to the, 5 years out before we even start looking at. But, it's always hard to tell what's going to happen with the economy in 6 months, let alone, 5 years from now. So I appreciate that clarification. I guess this would be a question for commissioners. For a potential 5.13, are you comfortable with staff and the consultants kind of fleshing together our comments and coming up with a more formal text that council will see, or do you want to see something, sort of wordsmith this and craft it tonight?
No, I think that the request is kind of general enough, and we've communicated that we're just looking for the feedback loop maybe to be completed, because it does sound like the outreach is happening. So, however the implementation looks on that, I welcome all forms of it without being too prescriptive and specific about how it has to come in. It was just looking for kind of ground truth so we can prioritize correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'm just sort of pre-planning here. So for the purposes of the motion, we'll consider a potential 5.13 as a modification.
Yeah.
But we'll let you guys kind of come up with the actual text of that for council. All right, so does anybody else have any pending questions? No? Okay, all right, so with no other pending questions, I guess I'm looking for a motion to open the public hearing.
I'd like to, start a motion to open the public hearing for consideration of the Housing Action Plan.
All right, I have a motion to open the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. The public hearing is now open. And then, again, one last time, does Planning Commission have any questions for staff or the consultant? No? Okay. And then, since Planning Commission doesn't have any additional questions, I'll open up for general public comment. Again, we don't have anybody in person tonight. Does the one person who has attending online, are they interested in making public comment?
Mike, if you are interested in making a public comment on the Housing Action Plan, please raise your hand. Mike would like to make a comment.
You would?
Mike, please spell out your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Mike Lawrence, Lawrence. And the best advice that I can lend is that the street frontage improvements be solidified far in advance of the finalization of the design standards. The engineering contracts must not change in the middle of a development analysis, because it throws everything into a time loop, which takes years to sort through. And the sooner you address the availability of funds for the city contributed street frontage improvements, the easier it is for the developers to plan for their knowledge of what it will take for their private developments to afford to make these improvements to the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So staff, that sounds like it's more of a coordination and timing issue on the city's end for that?
I'm hopeful they'll be in coordination with these improvements.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
I'm hopeful that
Oh, no, sorry, not you, Mike. I'm talking to staff.
Oh, sorry. I
couldn't hear him.
just wasn't sure if we are to ask clarifying questions or.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. When you're talking about street frontage improvements finalizing before the Could you say that again before?
Yes, before I start to design the footprint of a building, I need to know all of the city's plans for the street frontage improvements, what their engineer has and has not approved, if there will be changes due to contract changes with the consultants, and to let you know those affect everything from the footprint of the design to the architecture of the building.
Okay. So that sounds like a comment about like development review and permitting of a specific building. Which the housing action plan, I think, is like a higher level kind of actions we can take to implement our housing policy. So I appreciate the comment. I've noted it down. It will be in the record. Unless the housing action plan has specific design standards, street frontage. No. So, okay. Just want to make sure I'm understanding the comment and how it relates to the housing action plan. If I've missed the comment, please feel free to clarify.
No, you understood the question correctly. It's that changes in downstream from the beginning of a due diligence or site plan analysis causes everything to be changed. It's a waterfall effect. You change something on the street frontage, that means that all the architectural, the civil, everything else has to change to coordinate with it. So the solidification of all of those design standards initially with the housing action plan determines how many units can be developed on a site and when city funding is available to make their contribution to those street frontage improvements.
Okay. I do think there was an action about making sure permitting is really clear and direction for what we need in application and streamlining our ADU permitting, more so than it is now, not having land use, things like that. So I can see how it relates in that sense. Typically, however, the developer is responsible for street frontage improvements as part of a development, but that I'd say is not, that's more in the weeds than the housing action plan really kind of discusses. So I don't know if that helps clarify. But I do have the comment, and we have it in the record. And so we can consider that, look at it closely and see if it overlaps with the plan, to take that into consideration.
Please, thank you. And it has to be part of the planning process versus the permitting process. If you change the planning process, then it certainly changes the permit.
And by planning process, you're referring to the housing action plan or, sorry, seeking further clarification.
For site plan approval, for site plan determination, for density determination.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Your comment period has come to an end.
Thank you.
All right, just double checking that we don't have anybody else who is attending online that wishes to speak.
There is no one else currently available or willing to speak.
Okay, did we have any written testimony that was submitted?
No written testimony was submitted.
Okay. Hearing that, I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing?
I have a motion to close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Public hearing is now closed. One last opportunity for Planning Commission discussion. Does anybody have any additional comments? All right, looking around, not hearing or seeing any. So at this point, I am looking for a motion for the overall plan.
Motion to vote on a recommendation for the Housing Action Plan with proposed additions and amendments in concept as discussed at this meeting.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Thank you so much. It's been great working with you all.
Thank you. Appreciate all the hard work on this.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So it looks like the next item on the agenda is the director's report.
There's no director's report tonight.
No director's report. Okay. Item number 7, miscellaneous business by planning commissioners. Anybody have any miscellaneous business?
Sorry, I was out last week. Our last meeting, I had an emergency that popped up. I don't remember if I sent an email requesting an excused absence, but I don't know. I wasn't able to follow if that was followed up on.
We got the notification in time. So
Okay.
we were able to excuse your absence.
Thank you all. I appreciate that. Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Not hearing or seeing anything, I'll go ahead and declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.